The college baseball season is now over. LSU has been crowned the champions of the nation. To no one's surprise, another SEC team wins the national title. Coastal Carolina had some good fight in them, but just was unable to pull through. Got that sweep for LSU. 2 games, all they needed. Looked pretty convincing for the most part. I mean, overall, their entire tournament, really good stuff. They only lost, 1 game, and it was one of the most shocking wins or I guess losses for them of the tournament, with them losing to Little Rock, one of the worst teams that made it. So surprising that was their only loss they got, but they were able to turn it around, and yeah, that was like their closest kind of 2 game series that they had with that Little Rock squad, which was fun to see there. And yeah, LSU just able to clutch up when it mattered most and looked like the better team versus Coastal Carolina. That first start, Cade Anderson looked super impressive. Coastal really couldn't do anything against him, and people were saying that maybe this was the most impressive start of the College World Series, or maybe of the season. It's still tough to look past Gage Wood, in my opinion. I know people are pointing to the level of competition, but still, Murray State was a team that made the College World Series. You can't look past them just because maybe they came in as under the radar. They were not once they made the College World Series, and to shut them out, especially, that offense that was crushing the entire way through, for Gage Wood to show up and put them in their place was super impressive. Still have that pitching performance over Cade Anderson, but, still super impressive 1-0 win to be able to shut it down when the game was super tight the entire way through. Got 1 run in the first for LSU, and that was the only run of the entire game, and that just carried through so super impressive that. And then game 2, obviously there was controversy at the very start with the ejections that maybe shouldn't have happened. I think there are a lot of opinions about that, but LSU took the most of it and was able to once again look like the better team for most of the game there. Coastal made it close at the end, which was fun to see, that the game, got to a place where we finally see Coastal put together some sort of offense. They were really struggling in the College World Series final. Just offense couldn't do anything, especially with runners on. But LSU looked like the best team, and they proved it here, winning the national title again.
Yeah, definitely a disappointing end to the season for Coastal there. Like you said, couldn't get the offense going. That wasn't really a surprise, just given the 1-2 punch that LSU has. Really just a tough pitching staff to put up runs against. And, I mean, the Coastal pitching staff, one of the best in the country, did a pretty good job against LSU as well. Held them to 1 run in the first game and, 5 in the second. That's not terrible either. Good performance. Just LSU played better in that final. LSU played one of the cleanest tournaments there. Only 1 surprise loss, like you said. But props to LSU. Props to the SEC for continuing to produce championship caliber teams year in year. Just seems like a little bit of an anticlimactic end to the season. Definitely some fireworks in that last game. Not too often you see ejections in the first inning. Unfortunate to see some umpires getting in their feels that early in the game. Props to LSU, and quite the season we just witnessed.
Yeah, going back to the umpire situation, I mean, he did give them ample time to, calm down a little bit, but in that moment, you got to have a longer leash. It's tough. I know the home plate umpire has had some sort of controversies in the past too, with throwing out Cam Canarello last year and the Supers. So, and then obviously that carrying over to the next game there, and it would have done the same here if Coastal Carolina was able to clutch up and come back. They wouldn't have had their head coach again for that final game. But yeah, it's tough to know exactly how things would have turned out if things didn't happen the way they did in that first inning. But yeah, who knows? Sometimes when a coach gets ejected, it puts a fire behind the team, and they're able to really rally behind that and come up with just new energy. But I don't think Coastal Carolina was ever lacking that from that sense. But yeah, LSU just for the most part played a cleaner and better brand of baseball, and that's what we've been seeing most of the year with this LSU squad. They've looked like one of the best teams in the country. Maybe even when they weren't ranked the highest, they still looked like they had one of the highest potentials. And yeah, I think that shows in how we ranked them a lot of the season, that even when they did hit their struggles a little bit, they weren't dropping as quickly, and maybe they were rising quicker than other teams around them, just because they have shown glimpses of their true potential, and they didn't really have any terrible weeks. It was just, going through that SEC schedule is always a rough one, and you might hit those few weeks where you are just facing really good competition every single week. You don't get a break, and that just kind of builds on itself. And they had the pitching staff and they had the offense when it mattered. And they showed that. There were only a few teams that had complete, teams on both sides of the ball, and LSU was one of the few. We had Arkansas as well, and obviously they played against each other, and LSU came out on top in some really, really close games there. But yeah, overall, good season. A lot of upsets through most of the season. It was exciting. Yeah, and like you mentioned, a little disappointing in the end. Would have loved to see that game 3. It's always fun where everything's on the line there. Unfortunately, just missed out. But yeah, we have some season predictions to get through. Going into this past week, I was up 3 points, 48-45. But with some quick math here, running through what are 8 for Omaha before the postseason started. I got 3 of those. Kevin, you got 4, so that's a +1 for your side. Only down 2 now. You also made some good predictions with Coastal Carolina. Once the 8 teams were set, had them making the finals. So that's a +1 there for you again. And then, I was just riding Arkansas a lot of the way, and unfortunately that bit me. And then, Arizona as well. And then for the winner of the finals, once that was already determined which teams were in, that it was LSU and Coastal. You went LSU, I went Coastal to have some fun here. And LSU obviously was the team that came out on top. So going into our preseason predictions, we are all even at this point at 51 apiece correct predictions. At this point, it's kind of weird adding in losses because some things don't really make sense in that term. But yeah, going through our preseason predictions, we had biggest surprise. I chose Stanford, which was looking great for the first quarter of the season. Stanford was really looking like a team to beat there, making some good upsets and being ranked for a little bit. You went West Virginia. We decided to give you a point for West Virginia because, as a team that wasn't the highest going into the season, making it to supers, still a pretty good spot. And yeah, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that team was picked to finish around 5th or 6th in the Big 12, somewhere in that range, and felt like they were better than that. I think I said in that video, didn't think it was necessarily an Omaha team, but I thought it was a team that would get back to supers again. That's exactly what they did, and they also won the Big 12 regular season title. Definitely had a rough ending to the season, but still, regular season champs is a big achievement and something to look back on in years ahead. So I definitely think they exceeded expectations and did more than people thought going into the year.
Yeah, for sure. I think, they may have had relatively easy schedule in conference, but they got the job done and were able to scratch enough wins down the stretch to hold their lead, which they had a very large lead for a lot of the season in their conference standings, and yeah, faced some tougher competition down the stretch and just did enough to keep that there. So yeah, decided that was a pretty big surprise, maybe not the biggest, but up there for sure. Now with biggest bust, maybe a little controversy here. We have availability of some points going in certain people's directions. I chose Vanderbilt. You chose Tennessee. I think going into the season, both of us were somewhat down on Tennessee to begin with. You can see that in our preseason rankings, having them a little lower than what other major polls had. But yeah, there was a part of the season where that looked very, very wrong, with Tennessee being way at the top of the rankings, close to number one, if not number one in some places. Yeah, they looked very good for a while, but did drop off late. Made a run down the stretch as well, but yeah, I don't necessarily think this is the biggest bust or considered really a bust at all. Making it to Supers is still a pretty good achievement. This Tennessee squad obviously lost a bunch of players from last year. I think there maybe is debate for Vanderbilt. They did get the number one overall seed here, but I think that was a little fluky. I mean, they won the conference tournament, sure, whatever. But, as the number one overall seed, not making it out of regionals for the first time in 25 years or whatever. Pretty crazy. 30 something years maybe. Yeah, pretty ridiculous. Didn't even make their final of the regional, which is crazy. That going into the regional round, you would say that's a pretty big bust for a team. So, maybe we leave it up to the comments to decide if there's a point there. But, yeah, I think there are obviously bigger busts going into the season if we're looking at Virginia and Texas A&M, two teams at the very top of every poll preseason, not even making the tournament. Those are obviously the two biggest busts, so I think just looking at that, maybe there is a little less validity to either of these teams, even more not being a bust for the season because they were just huge ones.
Yeah, I think the Tennessee pick was, like you said, looking really bad for the first half of the year or so. And then it was looking really good when they lost 5 out of 6 SEC series down the stretch there. Was it 3 or 4 in a row at home? Just looked pretty rough going into the postseason there. But still won a regional, made supers. I think in my prediction I said they wouldn't make it out of a regional, so just a slight miss there. Give them props for being able to find their way into supers. And then Vanderbilt, that's a tough one. It's tough to.
It's a pretty big bust.
It's tough to have a disappointing season where you're the number one overall seed, but it was probably the biggest bust of a postseason. So, you got to find the balance there between being the number one overall team heading into the postseason and then having the most disappointing postseason. Tough to navigate there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like the number one overall seed, it was obviously they deserved it winning the conference tournament, and they had a relatively decent run down the stretch. But they never looked like the number one overall seed through the entire year. They had their flaws. Some weeks they would show up and look really good, but there were so many weeks where they weren't. They just didn't look the part. And so, from an outside perspective, not necessarily looking super deep into it, I feel like it was a disappointing season for Vanderbilt. I mean, yeah, taking that number one overall seed and then just doing absolutely nothing with it is an embarrassment. But yeah, we'll hold off on that because of A&M and Virginia. Who knows? Maybe the comments will help me out there with that pick. But yeah, next up was our player of the year predictions. I went Jace Laviolette. You went Drew Burress. Neither were as good as expected, I would say. I mean, the power numbers overall across college baseball this year were down. Jace Laviolette, he had his shining moment where he played a game with, a broken hand again. Another year where he plays games significantly injured, just showing the character he has, which was super impressive to see, but in the end, didn't really matter. The team was an extreme disappointment, and he was a part of that, unfortunately. Didn't live up to the expectations of this A&M team, and I think he would say himself that it was a disappointing season personally and as a team. And Burris still was a first team All-American in most places. Pretty good year, but after his freshman year, you kind of expected some sort of progress forward. Didn't really have it. Obviously, I don't think he dropped off really, but as a first team All American, you can't really be disappointed in a season like that. But the door was wide open for someone like him to take the Golden Spikes because it was kind of an up and down year for a lot of people. And he just fell a little short there, not even being a finalist.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. He did drop off from his freshman year, but still hit 333 with 19 home runs. So if that's your drop off, you're in a pretty good position. But yeah, that was a player expected to be in the running for Golden Spikes. Just wasn't quite at that level, like you said. Still a first team All American at plenty of places and had a fantastic year. Just wasn't able to quite replicate what he did his freshman year. And, that seems to be pretty standard a lot of the time. A lot of time there's a little bit of a sophomore slump um, for some of these breakout guys in their freshman year. Um, but he's still going to be a first rounder next season. Going to be in the running for first overall pick potentially. Same thing with Jace Laviolette. Still going to be a first round pick this year. Definitely a disappointing year. Dealt with some injuries, like you mentioned, as well. Certainly contributed to A&M just having a disappointing season, but still a great talent and a great player. So I don't think either of these guys are hurting in their long-term outlook going into pro ball and everything like that. Just not quite player of the year candidates.
Yeah, definitely. And now, so no points there for player of the year. Now, pitcher of the year, I chose Jamie Arnold. You went Tyler Bremner. Bremner, not a great season overall, especially for a guy who should be probably dominating a lot of the mid-major competition he's facing. Jamie Arnold had a pretty good season. Could have been better, but very solid. Obviously, he's still an ace, so we take that. But he was injured for a little bit of the season and didn't win Conference Pitcher of the Year, and I think that's an automatic out. If you can't win Conference Pitcher of the Year, you probably aren't the Pitcher of the Year overall. So unfortunately, there still had a really good year. Was still an All-American, at least All-American caliber. But there were just a few names above him there that had exceptional years on the mound. So
Yeah, it's tough. Both of these guys, very good seasons. Once again, just not quite what we were expecting. Similar to the position players, both these guys going to be first rounders this year. Still have great outlooks for pro ball, just not quite what we were expecting. Jamie Arnold did have a very good year, just not quite at that upper echelon. And like you said, wasn't able to quite get conference pitcher of the year, and kind of need that if you're going to be pitcher of the year for the whole country. Bremner, bit of a disappointing season there. Still had overall good numbers, below a 3.5 ERA, over 100 strikeouts. I mean, most people would consider that a fantastic year, just given what he did last year. You expected it to be better. Expected it to be, sub 3 ERA playing in the Big West. Yeah, just not quite what we were expecting. Seemed like he was in contention to be, a top 5 pick this year, and kind of fell off from that. Still a first rounder, but just not quite pitcher of the year, and that's all right. We just both missed a little bit.
yeah, definitely not the best preseason predictions for us. It's obviously hard to do, just kind of picking things out of a hat here preseason. But yeah, there were maybe some more obvious choices that we could have gone with and picked up some more points. But now headed to our last round of predictions, our 8 for Omaha from the preseason. We had a lot of similarities. It's always tough choosing because there's just so many variables going into the season where you really don't know how teams are going to perform, even if they have all the talent in the world, especially this year like we saw. Starting things off, both of us had Texas A&M and Virginia making it. That obviously was not the case. Unfortunately, yeah, those teams were very disappointing. We had them as 1 and 2, respectively, in our rankings preseason, and yeah, obviously at this point, it was pretty much just which teams from the very top of our preseason rankings are we going to choose. Maybe have a few flyers in there, but for the most part, that's how it went. Um, Next, both chose LSU, so that's huge for us. Both of picking the eventual winners. We had them a little lower, but I think yeah, at number 3 preseason. That's what you expect out of a preseason top 5 team, and they definitely delivered there. Going down the line of teams that we had the same, both chose Georgia. Unfortunately, fell through there, but yeah, that was a tough one specifically for me. But we'll get to that later. Um, Next, Florida State, both had them making it, and that was another +1 for both. So good there. Then we have the ones we decided to go different directions on. So we both chose, I believe, 5 of the same teams, and then 3 that went different ways. From the ACC, I chose Clemson and Stanford. You chose Wake Forest in North Carolina. None of those teams made it through, so ACC didn't help us out there. We thought they were going to have a lot better year, at least making it to the College World Series. They had a lot of teams making it to Supers, but they fell apart there for most of them. And then the last 2, I had who else? Oregon is on my side. They did not make it. You had Arkansas. That was the Arkansas. That's a +1 for you. I didn't have them making it. Good pick there. They looked like one of the best, if not the best, teams for a lot of the year. And yeah, Arkansas fell up short there. It looked like they had the run of destiny down the stretch, but came through and saw the LSU buzzsaw, and just once again, they are maybe the unluckiest program to consistently make it super far in the postseason and just never have anything to show for it. So you got +1 over me there, 4-8 for Omaha, and with that, our last prediction was national champion. I chose Georgia. You chose Virginia. I think that should count as a negative, personally. If that's the case, then we're looking at some pretty fine margins of who had better predictions throughout the entire season. Right now, if we don't, if everything goes as we said predicted, I'm at 53, you're at 55. Congratulations. But if we move the needle a little bit, and people think Vanderbilt had a bust of a season, that's a +1 point. And if people say that, choosing a national champion that didn't even make the postseason, hey, that should be some sort of negative points, at least one. Then all of a sudden we're both tied at 54, and hallelujah, we got to go to a sudden death rock paper scissors match.
Oh, that'd be a tough precedent to set with negative points, but
Yeah,
definitely
we're starting it. Any terrible predictions? That's a negative, folks.
it certainly was a disappointing pick. Um, yeah, especially I don't know. That's just a difficult one, especially because Virginia didn't have a great start to the year. Didn't have a great year overall, but it felt like the issue with Virginia, more so than A&M, was just their RPI. It felt like Virginia had shown some flashes of being capable. Also had that Florida State series taken away from them, and kind of just felt like a more of a unfortunate kind of ending to the season. Certainly, I have nobody to blame but themselves. Should have just won more games and made the postseason, but it felt like at least with A&M, the opportunity was consistently there, and they just fell short consistently.
Yeah,
It
they
looks
they
like
hey, they had their moments. They had their moments, but
they they were back in the postseason picture handedly, and then got swept by Missouri, who didn't win a single other SEC game. So
that's a good team right there. What do you mean? Everybody said they were sleeper,
yep,
and they
that
were
was
asleep for a lot of the season. So.
Yeah, just tough seasons for both of those teams. And I mean, I think for a lot of media members across the country, a lot of title predictions laid right there in A&M or Virginia. So definitely a tough one when the two most talented teams heading into the year just have a complete bust of the season.
Yeah, if you're going outside the box here and picking that number 3 overall team, LSU, you look like a genius because that those A&M and Virginia squads just look so stacked that it seemed impossible for them to have a bad year. Um, like just seemed like their floor was just so much higher than pretty much every other team in the country, even in the top like 10, 15 teams out there. They just looked like their floor was just like, all right, this team is obviously making the postseason. They're like most likely a host, if not, a top 8 seed. And for neither of those teams to just do anything remotely good was crazy to see. Just consistently week in week out, just pushing them further and further down the ranks. Similarly, what we saw like Florida do previously, but Florida somehow always figured out a way to turn it around late, and they did again this year. But yeah, apparently those two teams don't have that kind of mentality. Weren't able to figure it out. Really had their stretches of pushing to make the postseasons, but never solidified themselves enough to have those bad down weeks, which they consistently had, unfortunately. But yeah, Virginia, if you look at their conference record, they were in a pretty good spot. Seemed like, if you were just taking conference record as its own thing, they would have made it. But now with these expanded conferences, everything gets a little muddy, right? You don't exactly know how good a team is, even in these good conferences, because of maybe the opposition they faced wasn't the best. In comparison to previous years where you're pretty much facing everybody in the conference, you're going through, and so everybody has a similar strength of schedule, at least in the conference, and now that's not the case with these monster conferences in the SEC, ACC, and Big Ten primarily. Big 12 still, I feel like, has pretty consistent across the board strength of schedule, but we did see it with West Virginia again. The team that won the conference had a little bit lighter of a conference schedule, so it'll be interesting to see how things play out in the future with if that remains consistent, where it feels like conference record just doesn't mean as much anymore because of that. But yeah, any final thoughts from you?
No, I think last thing I would say is just the Texas A&M Virginia preseason rankings versus end of the season. I think really just encapsulates this year as a whole. Just a lot of upsets. I mean, I know we ended with LSU winning the title, another SEC team, but beyond that, this was one of the best postseasons we've seen in a long time. Tons of upsets in the regionals. Just really a great year. A good year for the mid majors in the postseason. Really exciting stuff. And I think it's coming at a great time where NIL comes in. Everyone thinks the top dogs are just going to get better and better. And that is true. But we're also seeing some mid major programs take advantage as well. These things just kind of waterfall down. The top teams are taking the top talent from mid majors, but mid majors are taking top talent from worse teams. And so they all kind of just feed into each other, and it seems like the level of competition is just getting upped at every part of the country due to this. And so it was great to see that come into play, especially in the postseason there.
Yeah, and I think it does also flow both ways. Obviously, the top teams will keep getting the top players, but also, their rosters get pretty fill up pretty quickly, and some of those guys that maybe are extremely talented players just won't get the playing time and need to find it somewhere else. So they'll be going, looking in other places, and that might just happen to be mid-major schools in that sense. But should be interesting to also see how the new scholarship ruling pans out. Still somewhat up in the air, just depending on teams and conferences of how many scholarships certain conferences or just specific teams overall are going to have. But obviously, it seems like the SEC will once again get a little bit more of an edge. But we will see, certain schools who do invest a bunch in baseball be able to potentially make some pretty quick jumps into being national contenders. So that'll be interesting to see. But besides that, we have 200 something days till 2026. The season starts there. We'll see what happens. We might have a little bit here and there based off of that, but appreciate it. It's been a fun season, if not a little disappointing in the end, but we have had a pretty fun time overall, just seeing everything that's happened. Yeah, it's been a very exciting year for the most part, and hope to see you all next season. We'll I guess end this for now, and yeah, it's been a fun ride. Peace out. We have been The Sweep, and we'll see you on the next year.